If I asked you who was the main character from the original Aether story, who would you pick? Probably Edward Richtofen, and I would agree with that. He was the one who always had some grand scheme, and his actions were what drove the plot forward. Yet, despite being a playable character, there was a pretty major disconnect between us, the players, and Richtofen. He knew things that we didn't know. He went on adventures that we didn't get to see, and his true intentions were always a mystery. It may have been his story, but we never saw it from his point of view. Instead, that's where the other playable characters came in, primarily Dempsey, Takio, and Nikolai. Their perspectives were much more aligned with our own, making them the ones through which we experienced the story. But because of Richtofen's more dominant role in the group, they, and by extension we, were forced into more passive roles. We went through those maps blindly following directions, never really sure of where we were going. So when the finale came around and we finally achieved our main objective, it felt more like a big plot twist rather than the culmination of everything we had done because we never knew what we were trying to accomplish. Of course, in all of the maps from World at War to Black Ops 4, there were exceptions to this, mostly in Black Ops 2, but generally, this was the formula of the Aether story. Now, I'm not bringing this up to criticize those older games. It created an atmosphere of mystery and suspense, and I would argue that it helped to keep the basic plot more grounded as the lore got more and more complex. No, instead, I'm bringing this up because I want to contrast it with how the narrative was handled in Black Ops 6. When it opens with Terminus, so long as you were all caught up on what happened in Cold War, then you were basically on the same page as this new main crew and were fully capable of relating with them. We knew what they had been through, and we knew everything that they knew. But this crew also has their own goals that they want to achieve, making them more active participants in the story. At first, it's to break out of prison, find Maya's brother and kill Modi, but by the end of Terminus, a long-term objective is clearly established. Find the Sentinel artifact, and use it to bring back Maxis. There is still Sam, the one who's guiding us through things and trying to trick us into carrying out her own plans, kind of like Richtofen in the past. But unlike Richtofen, she's not part of the crew, and this isn't her story. She's just there for support. So the decisions that our characters make are still very much their own, even if they're not fully informed. Now, is the following journey the best written thing ever? No, of course not. There are plenty of flaws. Frankly, I still don't know why the tomb exists, other than just to be another map, and that's coming from someone who actually enjoys it. But I would say that it was a very immersive story. We experienced everything just as the characters did, and every pivotal moment impacted us just as it did them. And it all culminates in that moment right before the boss fight, with the Sentinel artifact finally under our control. Something we set out to do all the way back in Terminus. Obviously not everything went according to plan, but this is what it all led up to. And now you must choose between helping Sam or helping Richtofen. This could have just as easily been a cutscene where the crew made their choice independently from us, but instead we get to exercise some agency and make this decision ourselves. On one hand, there's Sam, our former ally recently turned enemy. She bears no real ill will towards us, and all she wants is to be a real girl, but this also just so happens to come with godlike powers, and she's kind of a psychopath, so we're not really sure that she can be trusted. But on the other hand is Richtofen, our enemy recently turned ally. He straight up hates us, has shown a complete disregard for the well-being of others, and is directly responsible for a lot of terrible things. But he also has the more sympathetic goal of bringing his innocent family back from the dead. Plus, he's funny. Ultimately, from a narrative standpoint, there really isn't a right or wrong answer. Even the crew is split on who to support. Both Sam and Richtofen have had the chance to make their case, and it falls to you to make that decision based on who you personally side with. Of course, whoever you don't choose will immediately resort to violence, and this is where the problems begin to arise. Richtofen's boss fight is significantly harder than Sam's, and while it's been a lot of fun to see people lose their minds over it, the difficulty of these fights should not have been a factor in the decision. It really cheapens this moment and everything leading up to it by punishing you for choosing one side over the other. Instead, both fights should have been equal, preferably by raising the difficulty of Sam's, so that there would have been nothing to interfere with your decision. Imagine how much more fun it would have been if this was something that you actually got to deliberate over, if it were something that you could actually debate with friends. Instead, it mostly comes down to, do I want to do the easy fight or the hard one? And unfortunately, it doesn't get any better afterwards. The final cutscene is only about a minute long, one of the shortest that we've gotten, and it's made up of two parts. In the first half, we see the main crew getting sucked into the Dark Ether by the Sentinel artifact for seemingly no reason, and then either Richtofen is reunited with his family, or Sam gets her body. To be fair, I do like those shots of either Sam or Richtofen looking off into the sunset, but I feel like overall it ended way too quick. This would have been a great opportunity to make use of Peck, Ravenov, Strauss, and Raptor 1. You know, those radio characters that they insist on having in every game now. They could have come down on their helicopter and had some final conversation with whoever we helped. Maybe they could have explained what just happened to the rest of the group, why they got taken to the Dark Ether. It could have been something like, oh, if the Sentinel artifact gives you something, then it also takes something away. And maybe that could have been the reason why helping both Sam and Richtofen was never an option. And if this was something that they both knew, then it would have been pretty unnerving to learn that they always intended to sacrifice us so that their wish could be granted. And then maybe they could have talked about their plans for the future now that they have what they wanted. I imagine they both would have said that they want to go off and live normal, quiet lives, and maybe that would have been the truth, or maybe it wouldn't. Only time would tell. It's not like they needed to flash forward and directly show us the outcome of our decision, but it would have been nice to get a bit more closure. Really show us how this chapter of the story had concluded and how it would lead into the next one. This is something that Cold War did perfectly with Forsaken. That outro showed us how we resolved the main conflict by containing the Forsaken, thus sealing the Dark Ether breaches around the world, but how that resolution also created new problems which set the stage for Black Ops 6. And quick side note, Forsaken's outro also had very little dialogue. Then there's the second half. I don't have as much to say about this one, except for the fact that they did the one thing that I never wanted them to do in the Dark Ether story, which was to bring back the original characters.
Rise. Your duty is not yet done.
I much prefer the idea of them just being long gone, part of some ancient history that predates the current universe. Their legacy lost to time, but their deaths the tragedy that all these new lives are staged on. However, I also can't think of a reason that they couldn't be here. Nikolai only killed Primus and Ultimus, but obviously there would have been more variants of them that would have been lost in the Dark Ether. And since their souls were inherently connected through the elemental shard, it makes sense that they still would have been together. I'm not 100% sure how much time has passed since Togner Toten, but my assumption was that this new timeline still started with the Big Bang, which would be about 138 billion years in Dark Ether time. I would say that they should be dead by now, but Zykov is proof that people can survive in the Dark Ether well beyond their natural lifespans. And of course, they're still in the Dark Ether, right where their souls are supposed to be. So while I really didn't want these characters to come back, at least they did it in a way that doesn't contradict the ending of Black Ops 4, at least not that I can see. And I just hope that they still respect it in Black Ops 7. Also, real quick, I'm very disappointed with how the whole Blanchard-Panos conflict was resolved. I thought it was really cool to set up this whole other side plot right at the beginning that would presumably overlap with the main story, and I was really interested to learn more about who Panos was following, how Blanchard would interact with Richtofen and the rest of the crew, and what kind of impact it would have on the ending. But we got none of that. We didn't even get any funny lines from Blanchard. All it amounted to was a completely skippable Wonder Weapon upgrade quest. But anyway, that's how I feel about the ending of Black Ops 6 Zombies. It started off really cool having to choose between Sam and Richtofen. It was a very impactful moment to end with, but then everything that followed kind of undermined it, giving us a finale that felt abrupt and underwhelming, which I fear is because Reckoning was never meant to be the finale. We're still getting another map in a couple of months, so there was no need for a proper conclusion to this chapter of the story because it's still basically ongoing. It's just that it won't be in Black Ops 6, it'll be in Black Ops 7 instead. And so far, I've been okay getting 2 Black Ops games in a row because they're going to be set in 2 different time periods, so presumably they'd feel different, at least as different as 2 Call of Duty games can feel. But when that game comes out, if the first Zombies map gives us the closure that I wanted here, then I'm going to be a little annoyed.